So we'll go ahead and get started this morning with I will call to order the Nicollet County Board of Commissioners meeting of June 22nd, 2021. We'll start with the flag pledge led to us by our returning Ms. Lewis.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. I would remind folks about muting their microphones, muting cell phones. That would be terrific. Today we do meet pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13D.021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting state and federal emergency declarations and guidance about limiting unnecessary person-to-person contact. This meeting will be conducted under that statute, the Nicollet County Board meeting of June 22nd, 2021, and the Drainage Authority meeting. County Board and Drainage Authority members will participate by telephone or other electronic means. At this point, Ms. Langhammer, any changes to the agenda?
There is no change to the agenda. You should have received just an updated agenda item concerning the award of the 2021 highway striping project.
Okay, in our email, there was an update on the Mr. Greenwood's item on the striping project. That's not a change to the agenda. That was just updated information, if I understand correctly. So I would invite a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Lipke moves, Kemp seconds to approve the agenda. Ms. Lewis, if you take the roll, please.
Lipke?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Kollars?
Yes.
Drennel?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes, the agenda is adopted. We'll turn to the consent agenda. Does any member wish to remove any consent agenda item for discussion? Seeing none, invite a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Kemp would move it.
I'll second.
Kemp moves, Lipke seconds approval of the consent agenda. Ms. Lewis, if you would take the roll, please.
Kemp?
Yes.
Lipke?
Yes.
Kollars?
Yes.
Drennel?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes, the consent agenda is approved. Public appearances. I'll ask if there's anybody who is using remote access to join us this morning if you wish to make a public appearance. And I don't see anyone who has shown up here at the courthouse to make a public appearance either. So we will move to the Public Works agenda item. Mr. Green, with the consideration of the 2021 highway striping project. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board and staff. The item I have today is to consider award of our 2021 highway striping project. We received 2 quotes for this project, but we did end up rejecting one of the quotes because they did not return all required documents as part of their quote submittal. The one quote we did open up was from Traffic Marking Services. They quoted us an amount of $111,037.65 to do this project. And this project, of course, is an annual contract that we enter into every year, and it restripes a portion of our county paved highway system. So my recommendation to the board today is to award the 2021 highway striping project to Traffic Marking Services for that low quote amount.
And Mr. Green, that was for the $111,037.65.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'll move it, Mr. Chair.
Kemp will second.
Kollars moves, Kemp seconds approval of the 2021 highway striping project. Any discussion?
I have a question,
Please.
Mr. Chair. Seth, you think that's reasonable?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. If you look at the bid results, we were very close in our estimate to what the bid amount actually was. I was only a penny off on the white paint and 0.06 of a cent on the yellow. So can't get much closer.
All right, thank you.
0.06 of a cent. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Lewis, if you would take the roll, please.
Kollars?
Yes.
Kemp?
Absolutely.
Lipke?
Yes.
Drennel?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes, the motion is adopted. The 2021 highway striping project contract is approved. Thank you, Mr. Greenwood. Additional information you'd like to share with the board?
I can just give a quick updates on a few different projects. County Road 12 is going well. This very dry weather is great for that project. The contractor is reconstructing 12 south of Kister Slough, and they have also started removing the surcharge material. So that project is fully underway, and they will continue to work on it until it's done. I'm anticipating more likely sometime in September, if weather continues to cooperate with us for completing that project. Today, soil borings are being done on the County Road 23 culvert ravine erosion issue. Gale Tech's soil boring company is out there today and will be out there tomorrow doing those 2 borings. So that's progressing along. Later this week, I have a kickoff meeting with SRF Consulting and Gale Tech Engineering to start talking about the design of the final plans and specifications for the County Road 21 slope issue that we have along the Minnesota River. And so that design work will continue through the rest of this year into next year, and we will possibly be ready to advertise for bids probably later next year with possible fall to late fall construction on that project. And the other item that I'm watching is the legislature right now. We need them to pass a budget bill, because if they don't, MnDOT will shut down their operations come July 1st. And since we have multiple federal funded highway projects that we're administering, MnDOT does play a role in some material checking that their staff comes out and does. And so if they're not able to come out and perform that work, we are not meeting the terms of expending those federal funds. So there's a potential that we may have to shut down our County Road 12 and County Road 13 projects if we don't find a solution around those items that MnDOT comes out and performs for us during those federal aid contracts. So the legislature not getting their job done is making me nervous, so to speak.
Any questions for Mr. Greenwood?
Oh, yes, Mr. Chair. Seth, I know last year, I believe, when the river went a little low by County Road 21, you said that was making it worse. Is that happening now again?
Well, luckily, the river did not come up, late last fall through the winter and spring. So it's remained low and continues to remain low. So that temporary slope repair project we did appears to be stable and staying in place. So
thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Please.
Thank you. Seth, could you remind us all again about the Highway 169 situation as it goes through Mankato, North Mankato, and the input that is being taken?
That mic closer, you won't sound.
Yes. Maple, along with MnDOT, as you know, has embarked on a trunk highway 169 corridor study. Right now in the process, public meetings are being done to solicit input from the public on various options and scenarios for implementing changes to the 169 corridor. So I passed along an email, I believe possibly last week or the week before, letting you guys know what dates, if you're interested, that you could participate in those public forums. And I think we got another open house coming up here soon.
I believe there's one on Thursday.
Yeah, I was just pulling up my calendar here.
Right.
That does sound correct, Terry.
Yep. Wednesday at 5 o'clock. There's a public open house and it's on Zoom.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
On our consent agenda this morning, we ended the probation, brought on whatever the permanent type of status is, the end of the probation for Kyle Peterson, Brad Fitzner, and Cameron Grommers. So I hope you'll pass along our thanks and our congratulations on the completion of the probation period.
Thank you, I will.
Any other questions for Mr. Greenwood? Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for the update and thank you for the info on the striping project. We'll turn to the county attorney's office, victim witness coordinator grant renewal. Good morning.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you for giving me the time this morning to bring before you a request for approval from the board to renew the victim witness coordinator grant application. By way of background, we applied for a competitive grant for funding this position in 2017 and were awarded $140,000 for a 2-year grant cycle. That was renewed in 2019, and in 2021 it will again not be another competitive cycle, but it'll be a renewal application. So at this point I am asking for board consent to submit the grant application to renew this grant for $140,000. I did bring this issue before the board during the workshop because there was some question about how that funding would cycle through, and we did receive information that clarified the wording that accompanied the grant application, and it does not appear that there are any changes to how that money can be allocated during the grant cycle. So if we are awarded the grant again, it would be for the $140,000 to be allocated as we have in the past. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there a motion to proceed with the grant application?
Kemp would move.
Second.
Kemp moves, Lipke seconds. Discussion.
Mr. Chair, if we could ask Michelle for the record, what happens with these communications with victim and witnesses and how it helps our county?
Certainly. Bonnie Peterson has been in this role since we were awarded the grant application in 2017, and we've established policies and procedures for communicating with victims where they are sent letters for every hearing if they request that notification. Some victims on cases don't wish to receive that communication, but if they do wish to receive that communication, we send them letters and updates about what the status of the case is, and if they wish to attend, if we were in person for court hearings, Ms. Peterson would attend those hearings with them if they wanted her to attend with them. Oftentimes she will attend those hearings in lieu of the victims attending those hearings, and then updates them as to what happens at each of the hearings. And certainly her communication role with victims has become even more critical during the COVID time period, because court hearings were often canceled, moved around, went virtually. And so she assisted victims with being able to attend if they chose to virtually as well. The feedback after each case, we send out a survey, and the feedback for Ms. Peterson's performance of her role as victim witness coordinator is always overwhelmingly positive. Victims appreciate the communication, and trying to understand the criminal justice process can be overwhelming, and she helps them understand that process and work through that process. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Questions or comments? Well, I too will, I echo your remarks. I think Ms. Pearson does a fantastic job. I hear nothing but wonderful things from folks who are in tremendously stressful circumstances of no fault of their own. And to have this service is incredibly meaningful. So I hope that you'll pass along our gratitude. If there's no further discussion, Ms. Lewis, if you would take the roll on the motion to authorize submission of this grant application.
Kemp?
Yes.
Lipke?
Yes.
Journal?
Yes.
Kolars?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes, the motion is approved. Ms. Fisher, maybe at this time, if you'd like to make your report at the same time, we could continue on.
Mr. Chair, since the last meeting, I don't know that I have any significant updates to bring before the board. We are working through changing our system for court appearances. The court is opening more hearings to have those hearings in person, although we will continue to utilize Zoom sessions for a significant number of our hearings, but there are some evidentiary hearings that will be now in person in the courtroom. My understanding is, for the most part, some of the social distancing measures that the court had put in place will be removed, but masks will still be required in the courtroom. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you anticipate that some use of Zoom will continue into the future?
I do. I think the court system is currently, I'm not sure when it closes. I think they're seeking feedback on what has worked well and what has not worked well during the shutdown and the remote hearings. And there have certainly been advantages to being able to allow people to appear remotely, particularly if it would involve a long driving distance to appear for a relatively short court hearing. And so we are actively encouraging the court to continue some of those hearings via Zoom, but there is also significant advantage to having individuals appear in person for hearings. And so I think there's a good system in place for feedback to monitor and measure which ones should go back to in person and which ones should have the availability for Zoom.
Perfect, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for your report this morning. We're going to turn to critical position review committee recommendation. Ms. Landcamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I have for you today a consideration of the recommendation from the Personnel Committee for the transition of the temporary position in the public services area. This would be from a part-time to a full-time position as the administrative support assistant. A little background on this position: it was originally hired as a temp during the 2020 election, but due to the increased demand of the license center, that position transitioned over after the election to assist with the license center transactions, combination of the Real ID extension, the proximity to the metro area, and the no appointment, which Nicollet County used quite often throughout the COVID era, increased transactions, and a combination of the new atrium office, where it's a one-stop shop where members of the public can come in and do some basic transactions rather than coming all the way up to the second floor. Has increased traffic, but then it also requires staffing of that. The Personnel Committee met last week with Ms. Nicollet and discussed this, and their recommendation is to move forward with the transition of the temporary position to a full-time Nicollet County employee. If you have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them.
Ms. Coben, maybe before we get to a motion, I'll just ask you if you have anything you'd wish to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Yeah, Mandy kind of covered everything, but I just want to reiterate that the expansion into the atrium area has been very well received, not only by the public, which is most important, but by my staff and other offices in the courthouse. It's a big area. It's always kind of been on the back of my mind that we should use that space. And now we are utilizing it, and there are so many benefits. I could probably go on, but with that becomes staffing, and we do have to staff it. And it's important to have 2 staff members down there all the time because of the security purposes, not only for the money and the inventory that's down there, but for security itself. It's been working well. We've been doing this for over a year or about a year now. It benefits our office, but it benefits a lot of other offices too. Administration department, other PPSD, even courts. It's a great place to direct traffic. And most importantly, we've always wanted to be, once we created PPSD, we wanted to be a one-stop shop, where we were envisioning one big counter that we could help everybody there. And this is actually kind of an alternative to that, not knowing how this would work, but it does stop as a it does facilitate as a one-stop shop. And I'd like to take that one step further to do a little bit of training. So the assessor's office with homestead applications, we can answer small questions down there, hand out forms, and do other things like that. So there's really endless opportunity down here. And then again, for elections next year, we'll be utilizing the same space again. So it's a good opportunity for us to grow. I know that asking for additional staff is not a small ask, and it's a heavy ask, but I do believe that this is beneficial to the county. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Let me ask
Mr.
members. Yes.
Chair, in making the motion to move to this transition, I would echo what Andy and Jackie have talked about in our personnel committee. I think there was a voice that said that open space was open for maybe too long, and now we're putting that space to better use for all of the items that have been covered here, including elections. So I'll move on behalf of the personnel committee.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Kolars moves, Lipke seconds the transition from the temporary position to the full-time administrative support assistant. Any discussion? Commissioner Lipke.
Question, Jackie. This person is actually bringing in more revenues, or helping us bring in more revenues also, right? So it's not really 100% bite out of our budget.
Correct. Thank you for bringing that up. That was one thing I missed. What's unique about our department is we are almost like a small business, that the more customers we bring in revenue for the county. Our revenues have been increasingly going up over the years. In fact, this year we're on track to have about $40,000 more in fees than we have in previous years. We additionally are looking at doing outreach in our department to draw in people to come to Nicollet County. We're centrally located. So we're kind of a unique department. Most departments aren't like that, where we can advertise, we can bring people in. And if we give them really good customer service, they're going to come back. And that's what we want. That's what our goal is.
And we discussed that already, like a lot of the Western Nicollet County people go to New Ulm because of convenience, but you get a lot of people off the 169 corridor because of the convenience here.
We get a lot from the metro. During COVID, we got a lot, but it's continuing. We get comments about, you know what, we'd rather drive down here and wait 15 minutes in line if we have to than staying in the cities. We pull from other area counties because of our location as well. So I think we have a good spot, and we just want to draw those customers in.
Okay. Other commissioners? Well, I'd just like to build on your comment about customer services. I've got to say, Ms. Copeland, every time I walk in, pleasant, cheerful, positive. It's just a wonderful experience, and I know that's got to add to the customer service quotient. And I know that it's different than walking into an empty room. Walk into a space with positive, cheerful folks is just a fantastic benefit.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, Ms. Lewis. We should thank Ms. Lewis for her social media work and helping talk about these services and customer service. So thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Well, you're welcome, but Jackie has let me borrow one of her employees to help with that specifically in their department and use her while I was gone. So much thanks to Jackie as well.
Wonderful. Well, if you would take the roll, please, on this motion.
Kolars?
Yes.
Lipke?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Drunell?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes, the motion is approved. The transition of this position is approved. Thank you, Ms. Copit.
Thank you all.
Ms. Langkamp, I think what we'll do is we're going to move to the human resources item on our, we can move to it. That's fine. We're going to move. Commissioners, we're going to, at this time, we're going to be closing this meeting under Minnesota statutes 13D.03. This is for the purpose of discussing labor negotiations strategy. Are there any questions about us closing this meeting at this time? If not, Ms. Lewis, if you would work with others, we'll be closing the meeting after we finish the labor negotiations strategy discussion. We will return to open meeting. All we have left are different reports, and then we will adjourn the regular meeting of the board and turn to the Drainage Authority meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before we go into closed session, if you could call for a vote to close the session for consideration.
Certainly. Is there a motion?
Kemp would make the motion.
Kemp moves, Kolar seconds motion to go into closed session. Ms. Lewis, if you take the roll, please.
Kemp,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion to move into closed session has been approved. Great. Okay, we've returned. We have ended our closed session. We are now back in open session. During the closed session, Commissioner Drannel, Commissioner Kemp, Commissioner Lipke, Commissioner Kolars, and I were joined by Ms. Krebs, Ms. Landcamer, and Ms. Zender Fisher for that discussion. Did I miss anybody? I don't believe I did. I don't believe there was nobody in the commissioner's room. Those are the folks who were attending the closed session. We have now returned to open meeting, and I would ask if there is a motion pertaining to licensed union contract for 2021.
Kemp would make that motion.
I'll second it.
Well, I'm going to go with Kemp moves, Drannel seconds the motion.
Sorry.
I'll go Kemp moves, Drannel seconds the motion to approve the licensed employee contract. I'm looking for the exact name. Just give me 1 second here. I thought I had the contract in front of me. Now I'll just turn to Ms. Krebs. You can tell us the exact group we're talking about.
It will be the essential license unit for law enforcement for the 2021 contract.
Okay. Is there discussion on the motion? Commissioner Lipke, I believe you had a question.
Two little questions. Field training officer.
Yes, so that's additional pay they would receive hourly for training staff.
So how many field training officers are there?
It would be if they, from my understanding, if they were assigned to train staff, so it would as needed.
And then they get that for all their hours for the year.
For additional pay on their shifts that they would work.
Okay. What was the other question I had? Couldn't have been too important.
Other commissioners, any comments or questions from Ms. Krebs or others? I would ask the Personnel Committee if you have anything you wish to add on this negotiation or contract.
Not at this time. Our thanks to the union, our labor attorney and staff. They made it easy.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Lipke?
So there'll be a nice check going to these people because it's going back to January 1st, right?
Well, I think it's fair to say every time you negotiate a contract, it's retroactive back to the starting date. So yes,
Okay.
as in all all negotiated contracts of this type in collective bargaining,
Okay.
it would go back. And I think I will note, and others have noted as well, the challenges in this market of finding and retaining qualified and exceptional staff. And so I know that was a foremost consideration of our personnel committee in the county to support our staff and to treat staff accordingly. So with that said, if there are no other questions or comments.
And probably a lot of retirements statewide.
Retirements and like, I would ask Ms. Lewis to take the roll on the contract approval.
Kemp,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yeah, I can't even do the Abby move. Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion is approved. The contract is approved. Ms. Krebs, thank you for your leadership on this.
Yes, thank you.
We're going to turn, we already had the county attorney report. I'm going to turn to commissioner committee reports. Commissioner Kemp.
I have had nothing since we were at the AMC meeting, and I apologize to my peers, but I realized I didn't announce the fact that I was ill on our Monday meeting, so that is why I was not present.
Understandable. Not a worry. Hope you're feeling better. Commissioner Drannell.
Yes, I did not attend the AMC meeting, but in addition, I had a broadband gig. Denny, you were there.
Yes.
We had a critical review. We had a department head and board workshop last Wednesday. Region 9 had its annual meeting at Turner Hall in New Ulm and actually left the county. Elected women were last Thursday, as was the Our St. Peter Zoom calls, and then planning and zoning last night. I think we were out by, or I was home by 9 o'clock, so life is good.
Good. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for all your work. Commissioner Kolars.
Hey, Mr. Chair, AMC district meeting in New Ulm, the Area Transportation Planning Board, our critical review, the Board of Equalization, our workshop, had the Greater Mankato Growth meeting, our Traverse to Sioux meeting, Minnesota Valley Action Council meeting last night, bringing us to today. Thank you.
Commissioner Kolars, anything of news from Greater Mankato Growth?
Well, I mean, the last discussion I think I shared with everyone via email, the comment that was made by Dr. Jim Habel from Mayo Clinic regarding COVID. He was asked at that time, this was a week ago, Thursday, what about this new variant and the new COVID variant? And what his response was, look, folks, if you don't get the vaccination, you are going to get sick. And that was met with some pretty somber faces throughout. So this isn't finished yet. We just need to keep vigilant.
Well, Commissioner Kolars, it's a wonderful opportunity to once again thank both our public health folks and Ms. Lewis, getting the word out on all these different vaccine opportunities. Walk-in, one-time Johnson shots. We had these opportunities at Patrick's, at the American Legion last week in St. Peter. Fun days coming up. So thank you, Commissioner Kolars. That's a wonderful reminder. Commissioner Lipke.
Yeah, was also at AMC with several of you. And Denny, I think you're looking better than you did that day. Was it the appeals night, the workshop? And due to, I don't know, a complaint or a concern from a citizen about noxious weeds, I was been in communications with Commissioner of Agriculture for Minnesota, who hooked me up with Tony Cordelletti, which is the noxious weed guy for the state, for MDA. And well, there's conversations ongoing. So thank you.
Great, wonderful, thank you.
Oh, and I'm going to go visit the Law Firm Boys Trading Post site this afternoon with a citizen plus some people from New Ulm.
Wonderful, that's terrific. Ms. McCormick, did you have anything you wish to add this morning? I'll give you a moment if you want to get you. Perfect, Ms. McCormick.
Good morning. I don't have anything to report today. Thanks for the opportunity, though.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Lipke.
Heather, one of the gentlemen I'm going to be hiking with this afternoon, I'm sure you know Denny Warda.
What's the last name?
Denny Warda from New Ulm. You don't know Denny? Oh, he's 93 and a half.
Oh, no, I don't. I'm sure my parents would know the name, though.
I know they would. Yep.
We'll move to commissioner meetings and conferences. Commissioners, are the meetings and conferences of which you're aware?
There's nothing until September that I'm aware of that would be the.
Right. Before I move, well,
Mr. Chair, I hate to interrupt, but I do, while we have the ability, want to remind you that are you going to register for the NACO conference so that we can get our vote in.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that reminder. That's very nice of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
A motion to approve per diems and expenses?
So moved.
Campbell second.
Lipke moves, Kemp seconds the motion. No discussion. Ms. Lewis, if you would take the roll.
Lipke,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes,
Drennel,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the motion is approved. Before we adjourn, Ms. Landcamer, is there anything in addition you wanted to share with the meeting this morning?
No, there isn't, Mr. Chair. I'm not aware of anything.
Ms. Landcamer did attend the St. Peter liaison meeting, and I thank her for being there. I know it was a short meeting, but you had an opportunity that there's a new police chief in town.
Yes, Matt Gruco has been appointed as a police chief. The council will be taking action and determining his actual start date sometime to occur in July. So we're excited to have him on board, and congratulations to him also.
Yes, Commissioner Lipke.
On that note, there's a new mayor in New Ulm, Terry Sweeney. I've had conversations with him already since he was installed. Do we need some kind of a motion to support Ms. McGuire for the national election?
Commissioner Kolars? I think that's what he's gonna ask.
I've been distracted. What was John asking?
Do we need some kind of motion to get a collective vote for Ms. McGuire for the national county office?
You know, I think making sure to register remotely. How did Rich Sway talk about it, or Julie Ring was talking about it at the meeting last week or a couple of weeks ago, saying that we should
Gary, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign, if you will, in some type of proxy manner, our vote to the Minnesota or the AMC president. As you said, I do take it that it is our board's intent that Mary Jo McGuire, commissioner from, I believe, Ramsey County, who's the candidate, receive our support at the national meeting.
But do we have to see that all our commissioners are in favor of that, as I am?
I'm certainly open if there's a commissioner who is not in favor of Commissioner McGuire receiving our county support, please let me know.
I am intending to register for at least the Friday, Saturday events, not in person, but via Zoom. So I just wanted to be part of that. But yeah, I think, Terry, if you could do the proxy thing, that would be great.
Ms. Landcamer's not going to let me leave the meeting the building till I get that done this morning. She's writing it down as I speak. All right, folks, with that, if there's nothing in addition, I'd invite a motion to adjourn the commissioners meeting.
So moved.
Campbell move. Campbell second.
Lipke moves. Kemp seconds. Ms. Lewis takes the roll.
Lipke,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the meeting is adjourned. I will, I know we're 10 minutes early, but all we have is the consent agenda. So I'm going to go ahead and, I'm sorry, there is
the public hearing. Yes. Sorry, Chair. Yes.
Yeah,
there's a public hearing.
You're right.
Yep.
I think maybe we're best then taking a 10-minute break
Perfect.
and starting again at 10 o'clock because we do have the public hearing.
Yeah.
So folks, we will start again at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Would you give me that stand-up thing? No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Right near your elbow. There you go.
Can we stay connected, Terry?
I'm sorry?
We stay connected without coming back in?
I think Abby's nodding yes.
All right, great. I think it was a fast period, but they all went in and warmed up. Well, we called the game over, and then 5 minutes later, they came skating back out again because they were doing switching of sides. It was an embarrassment, but it lives in history.
Well, good morning, folks. It's now, it's verging on 10 o'clock. I know that the recording has started. We'll give it maybe one more minute. Here we go. It's 10 o'clock. I'm going to call the Nicollet County Drainage Authority meeting to order. We have an agenda in front of us. I'll invite a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move.
Campbell
Lipke
second.
moves, Kemp seconds. Ms. Lewis, if you would take the roll on approving the agenda.
Lipke,
Yes.
Yes.
Kohlers,
Yes.
Journal,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the agenda is adopted. We'll turn to the consent agenda. There's one item on the consent agenda.
Campbell move the consent
Kemp
agenda.
moves.
I'll second.
Lipke seconds. Ms. Lewis, if you would take the roll on approval of the consent agenda.
Kemp,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Kohlers,
Yes.
Journal,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the consent agenda is approved. I think I'm going to turn to Ms. Copit first on County Ditch 48A public hearing for reestablishment of records.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Today at 10 o'clock, we do have our public hearing for 48 County Ditch 48A reestablishment of records. There is a proposed agenda in your packet as well. I will start out actually with the purpose of the hearing, and Kurt will go ahead and do that. And then I will go ahead and do the notice requirements, and then we'll move on to the engineer's report on this.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Kurt Dieter. I provide some legal counsel in different counties on drainage matters, since it's kind of an odd area of law that I enjoy doing. A number of years ago, the Drainage Work Group in Minnesota realized that most of our systems in Minnesota were built in the early 1900s, and many of the records were either destroyed or incomplete, or were difficult to determine when you were doing repairs or working with the agencies exactly what the as-built and subsequently improved system was. And so we amended the statute to add a subdivision 4 to 101 that allows for, if the board initiates this process because the records are incomplete, to appoint an engineer to make a recommendation to the board as to what the reestablished records should be to be used in the future for determining grade and elevations and those type of things. So the purpose of today's meeting is for the engineer to report back to you as the drainage authority to determine whether there's sufficient evidence provided by Chris to reestablish the records, which then becomes prima facie evidence in the future that that's what the system is. So unless there's questions of me, the main thing is to hear from Chris after we make sure the notices were sent out as to what his findings were.
So in the course of this public hearing, I'll ask Ms. Zender Fisher if you have anything to add regarding the purpose of the hearing.
Do not have anything to add, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, with this public hearing, we turn to record of notice requirements. Ms. Copit.
And yes, my office did send out those notices, the required by statute. They were mailed and posted on May 24th, and they were published in the St. Peter Herald on June 3rd, June 10th, and June 17th. The notice did include the Zoom meeting for joining by computer, as well as the information on how to join by phone. And I did not receive any public testimony prior to the meeting to read into the record.
Thank you, Ms. Copit. If there's nothing in addition regarding record of notice requirements, we'll turn to engineer's investigation and a report of findings for reestablishment of record. Chris Otterness, Houston Engineering. Mr. Otterness.
Yes, and if somebody could enable me to share the screen here, that would be good.
Ms. Lewis is doing that, and you now are the host.
Okay. Okay. Let's see if we can get started here. Can you see my screen here now?
We can't see your screen.
You can't right yet?
We can, yes, we're good.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Again, I'm Chris Otterness with Houston Engineering, and as was mentioned earlier, I was hired to prepare an engineer's report related to the records on County Ditch 48A, and talk a little bit, especially for any of the public that are online, a little discussion about the Drainage Authority's responsibilities related to the system. The Nicollet County Board does serve as that drainage authority for the system, which is a duty provided for under the state law, Minnesota Statute 103E. And the important thing to note about this is for any landowners on the system is that the landowners own the system. The county doesn't own it, but the landowners actually are the ones that own it. The county simply is the drainage authority that administers the system on behalf of the assessed landowners, ensures that they are provided the benefit they paid for when they originally constructed the system. The lands do have a right to drain water to the ditch, but there's a caveat to that, and that's within reason. There are limits to what a landowner may be able to drain into the system based on the capacity that is available in the system. Also important to note that these landowners, because they benefit from the system and have either them or their predecessors have paid in the system, they can petition for requested actions from the Drainage Authority. And there's a number of these actions that are identified under the drainage statute, anything from repairs to improvement to realigning the system. And these are all things that have occurred along the system already in over the course of its 100-year plus history. A couple things to note about how we go about working and managing these drainage systems. It's simply not feasible to, when you identify a potential need to immediately go out with a backhoe and start digging. There's a lot of things that have to happen along the way, including identifying the problem, determining how you're going to pay for it, and if any permitting is necessary, completed. But the very first step in this process is determining the record, because the record of the system really is the basis for the landowners and for the Drainage Authority to know what the system actually is, what it was constructed to, and what are the boundaries or baseline with which the system can be managed and repaired. It is required under the law that the Drainage Authority maintain an accurate set of records of proceedings that have occurred along the system, and be in a format that is readily usable. There's another part of the subdivision. This is something that occurred, I believe, less than 10 years ago. This 103E 101 subdivision 4A, which enables or allows for the reestablishment of the drainage system record. And I underlined the important text from this part of the statute. Again, states that the Drainage Authority may reestablish records defining the alignment, cross-section, profile, hydraulic structure locations, materials dimensions, elevations, and right-of-way of the drainage system. And one of the most important parts of this is noting that this is the condition that was originally constructed or subsequently improved. So it includes not only the what happened originally when it was constructed 100 years ago, but also all those improvements and modifications that have occurred since then. And the other thing to note is that it's based on what was constructed, not necessarily what was designed back at the time. A few of the objectives of completing this reestablishment, as I noted earlier, it defines what the public drainage system is and what the limits are for these repairs. Also establishes that as constructed a condition that I mentioned earlier. A few reasons why a Drainage Authority may complete a record reestablishment. One of the things to note is that usually this is done when there isn't an adequate as-built record of the drainage system. And very few, if any, systems that were constructed in the early part of the 20th century had an as-built record on them. And over the years, there may have been some actions or work that have tried to reconstruct that effort. On this particular system, CD48A, we do know that there are some missing records along the way, and there are some, or there is a lack of record on what that as-built condition is. And so, that's part of this process is determining what that record is with the best available information we have, the greatest weight of evidence. And again, it provides us that baseline for repair. And important for the public to note that work that is in excess of that as constructed condition that generally is considered to be an improvement has lots of other regulatory implications to it. That work for an improvement may not be exempt from Federal Clean Water Act requirements administered by the Corps of Engineers. There may be additional wetland mitigation requirements and potential for downstream impacts that needs to be considered if an improvement is done. So that's why it's important to note that distinction between a repair, going back to what it was originally constructed, versus an improvement, which is something greater and has lots of other implications to it. So part of our process in reestablishing the drainage system record is to first of all look at the records that we do have and try to establish a time frame of how things occurred along the system. And again, we have to piecemeal that to some degree. Typically, these older systems, they have gaps in those records, particularly in the time frame of the 1920s to the 1950s. There's very often a lot of missing records from that time period, and even going further into the near time frames, we do miss things in the records such as orders and that kind of thing. So we try to piece together what we have, determine what is the greatest evidence for what occurred, and we also utilize field survey along the drainage system to determine that original channel bottom and the original cross section. Part of that is also completing borings or probing into the channel bottom to determine how much sediment is accumulated. And based on that information, then we determine that as constructed and subsequently improved condition. And then finally, we have to try to piece together what the right-of-way of the system is. And that can be likened to a township road where a lot of these township roads, you don't have any sort of described or easement or legally recorded easement along the roadway. And instead, oftentimes you have to rely upon the prescribed notion of the road being there as establishing a right-of-way over that roadway. And similar to that with these drainage systems, there is a right-of-way along the system. That right-of-way generally is the footprint with which damages were paid originally when the system was constructed. But unfortunately, very few systems had a recording of where that footprint is. And so we have to try to piece that record back based on what is there now and what the likely impact was when they leveled spoils back at that time frame when damages were paid on the system. So I'll talk a little bit now specifically about CD48A, and I notice I have a bad label on our map to the right here. That is 48A. It's entirely within Granby Township. The drainage system at its upper end begins roughly in the middle of section 2, generally flows to the south, zigzagging a little bit through Duck Lake and ending at Middle Lake. And it actually ends just as it outlets into Middle Lake. It is entirely open channel. It does not have any public branches. There are several private laterals that come into the system that rely upon drainage, but those are not considered to be part of the public drainage system. So the CD48A was established back in 1908. There was a viewer's report done at that time with approximately 153 acres that were identified as being benefiting. And then in 1964, there was a redetermination of benefits completed. And at that time, they determined that 800 acres benefit. And that's the acreage that's shown in the hatched in area on the map here, the kind of the combination of the dark blue, which is the original benefits, and the lighter blue, which is the additional benefits from the redetermination of benefits. And then what we have identified in the magenta line is the area that actually drains into the system currently, and that is approximately 820 acres. So almost or over double the amount of acres drained into the system as are currently identified as benefiting from the redetermination of benefits in 1964. So that's also something that is important to note if the board would be considering in the future with proceeding with a redetermination of benefits again. A little bit on the history of CD 63. Again, as I noted, established in 1908, so it's about 113 years old. There was an improvement in 1964 that modified the upper part of the drainage system, and that improvement is shown in the graphic on the upper right-hand part of the screen. These graphics, I'll note, are also provided within our engineer's report that you've been provided. So that improvement is shown in the blue line. Actually, I'll note that the red dashed line is the original alignment on that graphic in the upper right.
Chris, before you go on, sure. I just want to make sure, because it's a public hearing, that this is 48A, and any reference to 63 should be 48A.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I had another error in here. Thank you for noting that. So then moving on into 1975, there was an improvement that occurred in the area closer to Fort Road. It was realigned in that location to follow the roadway ditch along Fort Road. That's noted in the lower left part of the screen. And then in 1995, there was a repair that included an incidental straightening near 441st Avenue. Again, these are all proceedings that had a documentation related to them in the course of the drainage system history that we have been able to find. Plus, we've identified via our survey that these actions were in fact completed and now match the current day alignment. So I'll note that one of the key components of determining the as constructed condition of the system is determining the original bottom grade or profile of the drainage system. And one of the things we do is we take soil borings and or hand probes of that ditch bottom, determine how much sediment is in that part of the system, and where we can find the hard bottom of the system is generally where that as constructed grade is along the system. And then when we do that, we prepare a profile drawing as we have shown in the lower part of the screen here. And one thing that I'll note here on the screen is that the locations of these borings or probes we indicate with this little hollowed out circle that indicates that boring location. And then what we try to do is match up the grade of the system as was identified in the original design plans, and try to fit that to the borings. And in some cases it fits very well, in other cases it doesn't fit as well, and we have to do a little bit of modification to reconcile the fact that it might have been dug out a little bit differently than what was originally designed. In this particular case, we completed a number of different borings along this part of the drainage system, and we actually had a very good correlation between those borings that we completed and what the design plans were for the drainage system. And because of this, it's pretty obvious and easy to determine what that original bottom grade was, given that strong correlation between those design plans and those soil borings. And so what we do is we try to reconcile the grades that were identified in those plans with the a modern day sea level datum, and we have to use what we refer to as a datum adjustment. And so that's what we completed here, and we were able to again get those original design drawings reconciled to the modern sea level datum. So again, as I noted, we had a good correlation, and we applied that to the as constructed elevation, and you can see that within our profile that those borings that we have are very close to that as constructed profile that we determined all the way throughout the system. So now I'm going to begin by going back through from the lower part of the system and identifying some of the things that we found along the systems and conditions, and talk a little bit about the grades. And with our, I'll begin at the starting point here at the bottom of the system out at Middle Lake and Duck Lake. And for those of you who may be familiar with this area, you may recognize some of the location here on the map. One of the things I'll note is this culvert that we have shown in the inset on this picture here. That is a culvert that is used to access DNR property out here. There is not only DNR public waters, but DNR owned property in this area. The alignment of the drainage system goes through here in this kind of bridge area between Middle Lake and Duck Lake. Currently, that culvert that's out there is substantially higher, upwards of about 2 to 3 feet higher than that original channel bottom in this part of the drainage system. However, I'll also note that the level of water in this area at the lower end of the system is affected by the outlet on Middle Lake. And this outlet on Middle Lake is not part of the public drainage system. It's downstream of the public drainage system, but it does affect waters in the system. And the elevation at Weir I've shown on the map here in this red dashed line. It's about 2 to 3 feet higher than the bottom grade of the ditch in this location. So that is not the sole reason that there is perched water and water standing higher than previously experienced up in Duck Lake and further parts upstream, but it is a major factor in that water elevation. As we move further upstream, the profile goes through.
Mr. Otterness, one moment, please. Commissioner Lipke.
Could you describe the meaning of perched for the culvert?
Sure. That's a good question. So when I say perched, I mean that the culvert is higher than that original channel bottom grade. And because of that culvert being higher, and because of the dam or weir on Middle Lake being higher, and then in addition to that, all the cattails that have grown up between these two lakes, the water levels have been held up higher between the on the Duck Lake side of this crossing. And that's important to note that it's substantially higher than the channel bottom, and the water levels are also higher than what that outlet is on Middle Lake.
And do you know when that culvert went in?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you know when the culvert was installed?
I would have to go back and look into my records. I don't know that it's clear when this particular culvert was installed. I know that there was some concern back in the late 70s about getting the culvert lowered and about replacing the culvert. I don't know if it happened at that time because the record isn't clear there, but you know, it is a fairly old culvert, as you can see on the photo. It's rusting, and this would be something that we'd be taking a look at as if the board would decide to proceed at some point with a repair report to review the condition of this culvert and determine whether or not it should be lowered, resized, and otherwise replaced.
Thank you.
So again, continuing further upstream, the alignment goes through Duck Lake, and we do have another photo here that shows kind of the outlet portion of the ditch coming into Duck Lake at the north end of the lake. As we continue moving further to the north and west, you can see the grade here along the area next to Fort Road. There's a I'll see if I can show you my cursor on the map here. The culvert is shown here in the middle of that profile area on the bottom part of the screen here. That culvert on Fort Road is at approximately that original channel bottom grade or as constructed grade of the system. We do have a photo of that here. We did note, though, that just to the downstream side of Fort Road, there is accumulated sediment in the bottom of the ditch here. Oops. Working to the north from Fort Road, we see the alignment proceed further to the north. There are a couple locations here where we have humps of sediment in the system, particularly where I have the green arrow shown on the screen there. There's probably roughly about 2.5 feet of sediment in the location of that area at that particular location in the drainage system. Moving further to the north here, the alignment continues roughly along the quarter section lines at the edge of the individual properties. We'll just note that the grade of the existing channel bottom of the system is pretty close to that as constructed grade here, so there isn't a lot of sediment in this area. And then finally, we get to the very upstream end of the drainage system, and the drainage system ends just shy of a driveway location here. Again, we have another photo here showing the conditions along the system, and the system in this portion is pretty well maintained. There is one hump of sediment approximately 1,000 feet downstream of the beginning of the system there, where there's probably about a foot to 1.5 foot of accumulated sediment in that location. I'll talk a little bit about culverts along the drainage system. We often find when we're doing these reestablishment of records that the number of culvert crossings are higher than what the original channel bottom is. In this particular case on CD 48A, we only noted one location. That was that DNR culvert we talked about earlier. That was substantially higher than the channel bottom, but just to talk a little bit about why this may occur, a lot of times the sediment does accumulate in the channel over the years. A culvert might be newly installed or replaced in that particular location, and very frequently, particularly with private crossings, but in addition, even public crossings, this occurs with that a culvert simply is put in right at the bottom of the existing sediment, and a lot of times that's because whoever is the authority over that culvert, whether it be a private landowner or a road authority, they really don't want to have to go back in and try to clean sediment out all the time. So they figure, well, let's put it in right at that top of sediment. And we find that occurring all over in the state where we've done these reestablishment of records. So it's important to note that that does frequently occur, and is one reason that we rarely rely upon the culvert elevations to determine that original channel bottom. As I noted here on the screen, the culverts also do tend to heave over time. I believe on that DNR culvert, there's a substantial difference from one end to the other on that particular culvert. I think it was almost a foot in that particular case. And that is also a sign that that culvert may have heaved over time. I'll talk a little bit about right-of-way along the drainage system. As I mentioned earlier, we try to reconstruct what that original right-of-way was based on the damages that were awarded during the drainage system establishment. That area generally includes not only that area of the ditch from bank to bank itself, but that area that was also needed at that time to construct the drainage system and maintain into the future. And so we generally look at what the depth of the channel is, what that width bank to bank is, and then try to determine that reasonably necessary area that was needed to place those spoils back at that time. And based on that, we prepared a table that's included within our engineer's report of the right-of-way width over the top of the drainage system. And in this particular system, it varies anywhere between 65 feet to 130 feet. And a lot of that width really depends on how deep the ditch is. In areas where the ditch is pretty shallow, there's a relatively narrow right-of-way width because they really didn't need to dig it very wide at that point. In other areas where it was substantially deeper, than that right-of-way width is quite deep in order to account for that, the side slopes of the ditch. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about a letter that we received from the DNR. We had provided the DNR a draft of our engineer's report. This was in conjunction with a meeting that we completed with the DNR, early coordination meeting to talk about our findings and talk about any concerns that the DNR may have with our findings, and also get information from them related to the public waters. And it was a very productive meeting that we had with them. We provided that draft report, and then they provided a letter reviewing that report approximately a month later. And they had two primary concerns within their letter. The first of which was a request to provide full documentation of proceedings that altered the drainage system. And our response to that would be that this complete documentation, it is unavailable. That's one of the reasons why we're completing these reestablishment proceedings, is because there is this lack of documentation. And as such, the record has to be determined based on the greatest weight of evidence. And so that's what we based our conclusions on, was that greatest weight of evidence, even though there were documents that were missing along the way. The other item that the DNR noted was identifying that Middle Lake outlet as that effective control for Duck Lake and the lower portions of CD 48A. And we do note that. I did provide that within the earlier slide here, showing what that elevation of the outlet is and how it may affect the drainage system. It's important to note again that Middle Lake outlet is outside of the public drainage system and is not part of the system, and not part of the county's management of the drainage system as the drainage authority. So our recommendations would be that the board order the reestablishment of the public drainage system record per 103E 101 subdivision 4A, and then also recommend continued maintenance and inspection of the system. We also would recommend moving forward with repair proceedings to develop and assess alternatives for repairing the drainage system. We do currently have a task order with the county to complete this work. We have not begun that. We're waiting until this proceeding is complete until moving forward with beginning a repair report on the system. And with that, I can address any questions the board may have at this time.
What I think I'll do, Mr. Otten, is first I'm going to start with the public comment, and then I'll turn to commissioners to see if they have questions or comments as well. So we're at the public comment stage of this public hearing. I will ask to see if there's anyone who wishes to make a public comment during this hearing. I do not see anyone online here. Let me just wait one moment. If there's anyone who wishes to make a public comment. And I do not see anyone here in the building who has shown up to make a public comment. I'll just confirm, does anyone here in the building see anyone? Okay, well, I see nobody for public comment, and I believe Ms. Copit earlier said that she had not received any public comment by mail, email, or otherwise. Is that correct?
That is
That's
correct.
correct. Okay, so I will end the public comment part of this public hearing. I will ask for commissioners, any questions or comments for Mr. Otterness?
Excuse me, there were some landowner inquiries in the past on this though, weren't there?
Well, Mr. Henry, I see that you're shaking your head. Yes, I know that. I believe Mr. Wenner may have asked at one point about questions regarding the two lakes at the southern part. Mr. Henry, you go ahead.
Yeah, there was a few actual landowner inquiries about this, maintaining the ditch and the channel through the lakes. And Gene Dorn actually had contacted me a couple of years ago to kind of get the ball rolling on this. So yeah, there's definitely been landowner interest in seeing this done.
Thank you, Nate.
Yep.
Mr. Henry, while you're on, do you have anything you wish to add?
No, I've worked with Chris and Kurt through the process here, and I think we've had good meetings with the DNR and it's progressing well. So I don't expect any surprises.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Henry. Commissioner Kolars.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it, Mr. Otterness. Thank you. And Kurt, good to see you again. This is more of a general question, but I'm curious. Knowing that farming practices have changed over the decades, how well were the 1908 ditches designed and built to serve landowners in 2021?
Well, Chris, probably from an engineering, but from a legal point of view, the systems that were put in 1908 were to dry down pasture. They were not designed for today's standards. And that's why as these systems are deteriorating, especially tile, we're seeing more and more improvement petitions, because if you're going to dig the trench anyway, it doesn't make any sense to put in a 12-inch main when you may need a 36-inch main. Or again, I'll let Chris bolster that with more engineering, and that's why we're seeing a lot more projects now that have retention in them, that they're improvements, as Chris indicated. The downstream impacts or adequacy of the outlet is important for improvements. And so I think you're going to see, I've always said, there's unending water work in Minnesota. And as these systems are 100 years old, there's going to be more and more systems that need work. And it's just a matter of whether you do them as a repair and improvement. The open ditch is a little bit better, that sometimes a repair is enough, but for tile especially, you're going to need bigger systems. So Chris has a lot more technical information than that.
Actually, you said it pretty darn well there, Kurt, from an engineering perspective. Yeah, we see that very frequently if these systems need to be replaced, and they're generally all getting to that time frame. You know, most of these systems were constructed between about 1890 to 1920, and you know, they've gotten to their life, the tile portions of them anyway. And so we see improvements generally when those things, those parts of the systems need to be replaced. That open channels, not as much, although it's again important to note that the use of these have changed. The practices that are the agricultural practices on landscape changed. Even the rainfalls have changed, and so what may have been adequate back then may not be as adequate now, or providing what people feel like the system should be providing. And particularly with these open channel systems, there's a lot of limitations as to what kind of function you're going to be able to get because of the grades that are out there. You know, these are dug into relatively flat areas. And when you're going through a couple different lakes and have an outlet at the end of one of the lakes there, I mean, it's important that for landowners to know, have good expectations of what they'll be able to get out of the system. And it's not going to be a condition where you're going to have a dry ditch all the way down to the outlet. that's not feasible with the current landscape that's there.
Well, and just to continue, I mean, draining the pastures in 1908 was just draining the pastures, and there's no way, I suppose, that they could have imagined how farming practices would change, correct? And now, looking forward, as ditch improvements are made and cleaned, and what will it look like in, let's see, in the next 90 years, and will those ditches be useful, or will they just be holes in the ground?
Hard to say, but I always say, this is Kurt again, that what they did in 1908, we question, and what everybody always thinks they're the smartest group that came along. I guarantee 90 years from now, whatever we're doing now, they will think, what were those people thinking? And I don't know what it'll be, but it'll be different. They may drain with the same tile and then pump back up into the tile to irrigate. You know, there'll be major changes in the next 90 years.
And I would still defer to that. I would predict that there's going to be some utility of the drainage system. You know, the water still will need to get off the landscape in some form. But as Kurt alluded to, I think that I would predict there's going to be more of a need for projects for storage into the future to accommodate those additional drainage concerns and be able to manage water. And certainly the more the drainage authorities and they're wearing their hat as being a water management authority, the more they can look ahead to the future on that. I think that's all the better.
Thank you.
Other commissioners, questions or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Copit, I see in front of us that we have both the item of making a decision whether to accept or reject the engineer's report, and also whether the board order reestablishment of the system record. Should those be two separate motions this morning?
Yes, and I'm going to defer to Kurt on how we're going to finish this up, and we will have the official order at the next Drainage Authority meeting. Go ahead, Kurt.
Thank you, Jackie. That's what I would recommend, is that the first of all, Michelle properly pointed out that Chris's report will be made part of the record. Chris, when you make it part of the record, can you change that 63 to 48A so that 40 years from now they won't be confused what happened today? So, and then we'll make that part of the record. If the board feels that they have enough information today to make a decision, then there would be, again, I'll defer to Michelle how you do it there, but a motion that the system, you'll see in the agenda, to make those two findings, that the system's records are incomplete. I won't read it all. And that reestablishing the record based on Chris's report. I'll put that into findings in an order, and I think Michelle at your next meeting will present it and answer any questions you have. So I'm not sure that answered your question, Commissioner, but I would do it in one motion to accept that the system's records are incomplete and that the engineer's recommendation is approved. And again, I'll use different wording in the order for you to review.
So Ms. Zender Fisher, if I might, what we're looking for is a motion that the records establishing the alignment, cross-section, profile, or right-of-way of the drainage system have been lost, destroyed, or otherwise complete, and that the recommended reestablished drainage system records for County Ditch 48A by a professional engineer supported by existing records and evidence. Does that sound correct to you?
That sounds correct, Mr. Chair. And then once that motion is made, as Mr. Dieter indicated, he will prepare the proposed findings and I would bring them forward for formal adoption at the next board meeting.
So I would ask if there is a, yes, Commissioner Lipke.
Since this is entirely in your district, would you like to make the motion? And I will happily second it.
I will be happy. I will make that motion.
And I will happily second it.
Morrow moves, Lipke seconds the motion as described. Does anyone wish for me to repeat that motion? Seeing no
I
one.
didn't find the first time.
Ms. Lewis, if you would take the roll, please.
Morrow,
Yes.
Lipke,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Journal,
Yes.
Kolars.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is approved. Thank you, Commissioner Lipke, for that observation about Granby Township. Next steps, either Ms. Zenda Fisher or Mr. Dieter.
I think you could, again, Michelle, you correct me how you do it there, but we could adjourn the hearing, or I don't know, Michelle, if you continue it to the next board meeting for their, I think all they're doing is signing the order the next meeting. So I'll defer to you whether we adjourn the public hearing at this point or how you want to do that.
My recommendation would be that we adjourn the public hearing so that it is in fact closed, and then we'll bring the findings before the board at the next meeting.
That makes sense to me.
So members, at this point, I will close the public hearing on County Ditch 48A. The hearing is closed.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Dieter. Thank you, Mr. Otterness. Thank you, Mr. Henry. We don't want to forget you. Members, is there any other business to come before the Drainage Authority?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Zenda Fisher.
as it relates to 48A, during the presentation, there was a notation regarding redetermining or the benefits for the system. And as you may note, Ditch Viewers is currently on this Zoom call, and the redetermination is currently in the works for this system. And now that this is complete, then that can move forward a little bit more efficiently. But I thought to bring that information to the board, as well as anyone viewing attention, we are redetermining the system currently.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Copit, anything to add regarding Ditch Authority business today?
Nope, I was going to comment what Michelle said, but she said it just perfect. So.
Well, with that, I'll invite a motion to adjourn the Drainage Authority meeting.
So moved.
Lipke moves.
Kemp seconds.
Kemp seconds. Ms. Lewis, if you would take the roll, please.
Lipke,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
Drennel,
Yes.
Kolars,
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes, the Drainage Authority meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you all very much for your help. Thank you, Mr. Otterness, again, for your guidance this morning.